I was out here and I was thinking about this garden bed and kind of just poking around the garden and pulling a few weeds and am mulling what I'm going to do to edit this bed. And so I thought, oh, that might be something to share with people, and you might find it interesting. So this is at my front entry, so you can kind of see the overall context. And I'm doing pretty well out here in terms of having enough evergreen plants for structure, and that bears out in terms of my thinking of what I'm going to do as we get in there, and I talk more about that. So for structure, I've got an evergreen dwarf rhododendron. It's going to bloom quite a bit in a couple of months, or a month or so. I've got a great little conifer. That's a cryptomeria. It's a lot like Little Diamond, but this particular one is called, I think, Little Champion. And I've got a couple grasses. That's what we're going to be talking about. But I've got ferns. This is that tassel fern, so that's, in fact, I'm just going to skip what that is. I'll have to put it in the notes. But it's a tassel fern. It's evergreen. I do cut it back every year, and I've already done that, and so that's why it looks so fresh and nice. And we've got some hostas. There's a mahonia in there with bold evergreen foliage. And then just in a container tucked in there, because I know you're going to look at it and say, what the heck's that? It's a tree peony, and it's not in the ground, it's just in a container. And I keep it because that bloom's going to open up and it's going to be pretty gorgeous, but that's the one bloom on that entire plant. So in my mind, not really worth it, but I let it survive. This is a drymees, so evergreen, red stems, new growth is pretty. My favorite hydrangea is starting to leaf out. This is Hydrangea quercifolia Little Honey. It's grown for its gold foliage. I've got an abutilon that by midsummer is just blooming its pants off and blooms forever. And then I've got two more little finely textured evergreen shrubs. This is a hydrangea, this is a boxwood, variegated. And I haven't given it a haircut in a little while. And that's one of the things I'm going to do to maintain this bed. Because I'm kind of playing with creating clipped forms around other loose and abundant garden shapes. So this is going to be clipped into a much tighter form. And it'll take to that because it's a boxwood. And this right here is another one that I'm going to keep clipped and dense. And its new foliage is yellow. It's great next to that hydrangea Little Honey. And I'm going to clip on that one too. These are really just grown for structure and for evergreen foliage. And both of them will take to pruning without a problem. I've got a dwarf species hydrangea. Hydrangea's on the brain. Rhododendron right here, which is very slow. It's been in there for several years, and as you can see, it's quite small. So I'm going to keep that in position. But that was a long story short. The reason I'm walking you through this is I have something that's not making me happy, and I have no reason to not remove them and do something else. And it's these two grasses, which are perfectly fine, good grasses, but they're just, I don't know, I can do something better in here. They're a carex, like Evergold, great ground cover, great weed suppression, and a lot of good things about it, but I don't know, I don't need it for its evergreen structure in here because I've got plenty of other evergreen structure. So I think I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take that out, which is also going to clear up my path a little bit. I'm going to remove it. And then once I remove it, I'll be able to see a little bit more what I'll do in this bed. But it's not going to be hard to find something that's going to work better in there than that. So I'll show it to you after I'm done. And this one, I haven't figured out 100% whether I'm going to take it out. I think I probably will, because once I get in there, I'm going to say, oh, I can do better. So stay tuned. But I thought you might appreciate just a little bit of narration in terms of a garden maintenance project on an established bed. Okay, here we are. It's 2 months later, and I wanted to show you what I ended up doing in this bed. Before I do that, I'll just give you a little scan of the garden today. It's mid-June, and this is the full front garden, just scanning. I've shown pictures of this in other videos. Matter of fact, there's another video that you might want to check out that shows a full garden tour on about this day last year. So anyways, so we're just scanning. Okay, that way you can get a little context. So it's right outside my front door. So what I ended up doing in this bed is I did end up taking out both of those grasses. And again, because my evergreen structure was, it was fine. I have the cryptomeria here, I have that rhododendron, I've got the ferns, I've got those two evergreen buns, and the drymies. So just tons of evergreen foliage. So I'm going to look at it from this other direction and just follow up with you on a couple of things that I did. I mentioned this boxwood on the earlier video, and I did go in there and I clipped it up a little bit, and that's just kind of an ongoing process. I just want kind of a evergreen variegated bun of foliage, and since it's a boxwood, it takes to that type of pruning without a problem at all. The other one that I clipped in, and it's another just kind of repeated rounded shape. This is a Lonicera twiggy, and so it's got more of a yellow foliage, and then that rhododendron is still in there. So, I am not, one thing I'm not advocating is clipping all your shrubs into little balls. That is not a look that I find satisfying. But, sometimes there is a place for it sometimes where I think that clipped shape in there is a nice way to just kind of bring structure, and it doesn't end up looking formal. It's just kind of part of that scene. Nothing else about that scene there reads as overly formal. I want to make sure you really get a chance to see that little honey oak leaf hydrangea, because in the first video it was starting to leaf out, but it wasn't really at its full glory, and now you can just see it. Look at that yellow. It's so gorgeous. I moved that shrub a couple of years ago from a different spot where it wasn't thriving, right? And it took to the move. I was a little worried. Took to the move without skipping a beat. And it is so much happier over here, because the other location that I had it was getting afternoon sun. And so that foliage was burning. And so it was a real bummer. So I moved it, and now it is just really, really happy in this location. The other thing that wasn't kind of doing its thing in the earlier video is this abutilon, which is just really huge. And abutilons are, a lot of times they're not very hardy. But this one, I have to say, is, we do garden in a pretty mild climate. I'm a USDA Zone 8, but frankly, oftentimes it's pushing a 9. And so, but this abutilon I have had 10 or 12 years, so I have never lost it. And it just blooms and blooms and just gets really large each year, and I just love it. The other things that I did, I took those grasses out, and so the garden is a little spare there right now. But let me just tell you what's going to happen. And, that's part of the process of gardening in a really, kind of hands-on active way, is that sometimes you take something out and then you have a blank spot. And that's okay. You know, that's just the way that it goes. So in here, that spot is a little blank where I had that grass, but I moved some stuff around, and what is going to be happening in there is that, okay, that's a blueberry, by the way, getting ready to give me some goodness. And that's a hellebore, which is there for winter bloom. And then this is a Fatsia spider's web, which I'm going to try and keep pretty small. So those things were all there. This was in there, but it was a little crowded, wasn't doing very well. So I cleared out around it and moved its position just a little bit. And it's a hydrangea. It's going to be relatively small. I should be able to prune it to kind of have it fill that gap, that under, I don't know, I guess I'm going to call it an understory to that blueberry. And but it's just got a really beautiful little flower that has little picotee edges, nice, rich, deep magenta, purple, pink. And then I moved just from a different part of the garden, because this is kind of one of those temporary spots. Ultimately, there's not going to be very much room there, and between the spider's web and the hydrangea and the hellebore. So I wanted to put something in there that would be what I call kind of a for now plant. And I have been doing a lot of just going around my garden and finding plants that are buried and moving them and dividing them. And that's kind of what I did here. These were things that I had. That's a little ginger. It's evergreen. And it'll be, when that hosta is not in season and doesn't have foliage, this is going to have big heart-shaped leaves right next to the edge. And this is a new-to-me plant. This is actually a new plant. This is a Heucherella. And I'll put the variety on the screen there because I can't remember it. But it should be also semi-evergreen. So those are the changes that I made. And, those gaps in there will fill this season, probably a little later. But they're not going to get as big. They're not going to overwhelm the path. And, like I say, gardens are process, and I hope you enjoyed taking time with me to just kind of talk about process. And if you have any questions at all, leave me a message down in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer it. Take care and enjoy your gardens.